Hi, so today I'll be doing my book talk on Hidden Figures by Margot Lee Shetterly. Hidden Figures was a book on three women. They worked for NASA. They were actually, the job title that they had was called computers. So what they did was they would compute the launch angles and all that stuff that now is controlled by like what we know as computers in NASA. Before, this was all calculations that were done by hand and by people. And the three women chronicled in this book were three African American women who were some of the most trusted computers in NASA during the first launch of humans into space. And they were so trusted and respected that one of the astronauts actually mentioned that if it's okay by her, speaking of one of the characters, that it's okay with him. Like, he trusted her. He wanted to make sure that she was on the project and she was okay with the calculations because he trusted his life in her hands. So I really think this book would fit well into a classroom, especially a math classroom, because so often it's men that are celebrated in STEM, and being that white men. And this is the polar opposite of it. It shows the triumph of three African American women in STEM. And it's not just that they were involved in the NASA space program, they were involved in computing. It's they were of the highest level and they're some of the most trusted. So this would be a really good book to have in your classroom collection because it shows students that anyone can do it. So especially such a marginalized group, African American females in the STEM field, it shows that they were involved in one of the most monumental events in the United States history. And this is something that you won't see in any history book. So it's important that we bring this into our classroom on our own. In terms of reading the book, I'm not really the biggest reader. It was more of I would read a few pages, put it down for a little bit, read a few pages, put it down. It wasn't a book that had me that I couldn't put down. I don't know if that's just because I don't enjoy reading that much or because it was a little drawn out at some points. The message was really good though. I think that, all students would benefit from reading this. It also shows the triumphs of these three African American women, the hurdles that they had to face. So in a time where racism was so prevalent and sexism on top of that was so prevalent, they had to jump these barriers, get over that. So it could be very inspiring to students who may feel the same way. Yeah. One criticism I might have of the book, it was kind of hard to read at the beginning, because it would go, well, actually, it's kind of the theme throughout the book. At the beginning, it was very heavily on facts. So before we even jumped into the main plot, meeting the characters and all that, it was about probably 100 pages of just fact-based knowledge. So it was really heavy on that. And then if you were able to get through that, then it jumped into the characters, introducing you to these three African American women. And that's where the storyline started to pick up. And then they would continue with the storyline for a little bit. And then they would go back and introduce some more facts. So I think it would have been a little better if they were somehow able to intertwine the facts within the story. I think it would have made it more readable and more easy to get through. One more thing I forgot to touch on earlier that I really did like about the book was that they talked about the racism and sexism. So the racism that was happening in the South during this time period, and the sexism that was also so prevalent during this time period. One of the most powerful messages of the whole book, I think would be a good closing thought, was that although this racism and sexism existed outside of the office, everyone that worked in the company, everyone that worked for NASA, that was in the space program with them, when they were at work, they respected the women. They wanted them on their team. People stood up for them. There was no doubting their abilities. So this transcended racism and sexism because everyone knew how skilled and talented they were at their craft. And I think that was really a good message to see.